You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cricket Podcast, where we're going to be previewing the Asia Cup, which kicks off in just a couple of days. I'm Jack Hope. I'm joined by Max Rowe-Brown. Max, how are you doing today?
Hello. Yeah, very good. Very good. Thank you.
And joining us for this show is Nick Brookes, the author of An Island's 11, a story of Sri Lankan cricket. I've just finished recording an interview, which we'll put out for Patreons really shortly. And then for other people, maybe a little bit later in September. Nick, pleasure to have you on the show. I'm going to give you an opportunity right now, right at the start, to plug your book and tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks so much for having me on, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. So my book, which I have in my hand, An Island's 11, the story of Sri Lankan cricket. It is a fairly comprehensive history, going right back to the start of the game in Sri Lanka in 1796 through to the T20 World Cup victory in 2014. Lots of stories, hopefully, that have been untold before, anecdotes from the players. And so if you are interested in Sri Lankan cricket, please do go out and buy it.
Yeah, I've got my copy here. I finished it yesterday. I thought it was really, really interesting. And if you are a Patreon, you'll get a little bit of a taste of that out tomorrow, probably, where Nick and I talked through the age of Arjuna, 1988 to 1999, which was a lot of fun. Max, I'm going to tell you the messages for our listeners today. We have a Patreon, as we mentioned, patreon.com/the Cricket Pod for exclusive shows and content from just £4 a month. We're on Twitter and Instagram at the Cricket Pod. And this show is presented by everyone's favourite sponsor in the sporting world, manscaped.com. Use the code CricketPod for 20% off at their website, which is manscaped.com. Code CricketPod. I said that in a weird way, haven't I? Anyway, we're going to talk about the Asia Cup. What we will do on this show is have a quick look through all of the 5 teams that will definitely be there, maybe discuss the qualifier as well, and give you our thoughts on who we think will come out on top. Usually when we do these previews, Max, we go into we do have a whole WhatsApp conversation about which order we're going to do things and what topics we're going to touch upon. This one's going to be a little bit more freestyled, isn't it? So I'm going to throw it over to you, to decide what we do first. Now, we could talk about anything here. So
absolutely anything. Why don't we do a brief about how the tournament's actually going to work first?
What a wonderful idea. And who better to do that brief than you?
Yeah, it is. There's my role. Right. So we have 5 confirmed teams, the ICC 4 members, plus 1 qualifier to be determined. Either, if I'm not mistaken, the UAE, Kuwait, Singapore, or Hong Kong, who will be facing off in Oman to decide who gets the questionable delight of being beaten by India and Pakistan several times in Group A. And then over at Group B, we have the also-rans, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, who will be facing off for the delight of losing in the semi-finals to India or Pakistan. That's my rough prediction for the tournament. It's I think that you alluded to the format. It's 6 into 4, which is always good. Nice way of elongating things, but it's set up quite nicely with India and Pakistan in the same group, plus the qualifier with the best intention of an India-Pakistan final, isn't it? That looks like what the plan is, and it's what cricket wants, isn't it? Let's be honest.
It was definitely a money spinner, isn't it? Right, should we let's do Group A first, because there's only 2 teams to talk about in that, and we've had questions about both of them, and then we'll talk about the teams you cruelly dismissed as also rants in Group B, Max. So India and Pakistan. The tournament, it's as much a story so far about who will not be there for them as who will be there. So Pakistan will be coming into the tournament with everyone you'd expect to be there except Shaheen Shah Afridi. Nick, I'm going to ask you here a pretty direct question. How much of a miss is he going to be for Pakistan and for the tournament as a whole?
I think he's a massive miss for Pakistan, especially because I think he's, after the T20 World Cup victory that they had over India, I reckon he's got a bit of a sort of psychological rub over some of those top order batsmen. And I think, he really is the spearhead of their attack. And there's no doubt that they're going to miss him, but they are pretty well stocked with seamers, aren't they? And we've got a situation where India are missing Bumrah and Harshal. Sri Lanka are also missing Chamira and Benura Fernando. So it is kind of much of a muchness amidst the sort of big three that they're all missing their kind of pace spearhead.
Max, the guys missing for India, of course, are Harshal and Jasprit Bumrah. I saw a video today of Jasprit Bumrah doing some hurdles. So obviously his back injury isn't too bad, enough to rule him out of this tournament, maybe back for the World Cup. A little bit of a shame that he won't play at this tournament, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a massive shame. You always want your best players on show, don't you? In global tournaments, whichever way. And every team, has gone into it picking pretty much the strongest squad they can. So it is a shame that those top players won't be there. But yeah, like you said, Nick, it's quite interesting that everyone in out of those three are sort of in a similar boat, and I guess it comes down to strength and depth at the end of it, doesn't it? And India are quite lucky that despite the fact they might be missing Bumrah and Harsh Patel, they can call on the likes of Bhuvi Kumar and Arshdeep, who are, well, Bhuvi Kumar's not exactly a like for Jasprit Bumrah, but he's quite good. We know what he's all about, and he's come back into, after a bit of injury trouble, really come back into being formidable in white ball stuff. And Arshdeep Singh is a really nice tailor-made replacement for Harshal Patel, if not with lower order runs, certainly with his bowling. So I suppose, overall having a few injuries around is advantage for India, really, isn't it? Despite not having the best bowler in the world, which just seems like a strange thing to say.
Yeah. Well, it's the strength and depth thing again, isn't it? From an India point of view. The big match is on Sunday. India v Pakistan being the big match in question here. The two teams couldn't really have had more different preparations, I think, for this tournament from a T20 point of view. Pakistan played a one-off T20 against Australia in April. That was their last match. And it feels like India have been playing a T20 every other day for the last 3 months. Max, I say India have been playing every other day for the last 3 months. It's been quite a changed squad for India. Do you think they will go in with a better idea of who should play where, and therefore we should rate them as big favourites on Sunday?
They probably will go in with a better idea of who should play where, and they'll probably also play Rohit Sharma, KL Rahul, and Virat Kohli as 1, 2, 3. So, and that kind of plays perfectly into how Pakistan might be able to beat them, because we've said it a number of times. Babar Azam, as an opener in T20 cricket, will very reliably score you a reasonable number of runs, not very quickly, and it'll be a case of the what we like to term the sunrisers approach of try and get it to a chase of 160, 170, and hope your bowlers can do the job. And in a world with Shaheen in it, that's a very doable thing. He's not there, which isn't ideal. But like you said, there's plenty of strength and depth in Pakistan, as there is with India. So if India do go with that approach, I think that opens the door for Pakistan to be able to do something. But if they're sensible and we see perhaps the likes of Pandya, Pant, Sky, and maybe even Deepak Huda in sort of the 3 to 6 roles, then I would say India probably likely have too much firepower for Pakistan.
Nick, do you think India will play Max's team, or will they go with the classics? King Legend, Rohit, Kohli. What do you reckon?
I think there's no doubt they'll go with the top 3 of Rohit, KL, and Kohli, which I am going to be bold and risk the ire of many by saying I don't think that's their best top 3 by a long way at the moment. And I think that after the World Cup, we will see them move on from some, if not all, of those guys in T20 cricket. I find it hard to see them moving away from Sky at 4, Pant at 5, Hardik at 6, maybe swapping Pant and Sky, given the left-hand, right-hand thing. And then I think we'll see Jadeja, Yuzi, and the 3 seamers. I think although they've, experimented a lot with Huda and DK over the last few months, I find it hard to see either of those two getting into the team at least for Sunday, unless someone who will not be named goes through doesn't score any runs and eventually gets dropped. I don't see how else one of those guys gets into the team at the moment.
I kind of agree with that. Even that, my view with this India T20 side is that they revert to conservatism when the pressure is down. We saw them play some quite attacking cricket against England and West Indies and Zimbabwe recently, and it sort of feels like they're about to turn a corner. And then you remember that in some of those matches, Kohli wasn't available. He was having a rest. And, Kohli's not having a rest, I don't think, unless someone has said to him, you're definitely going to be playing in that. You've got nothing to prove. You're going to be playing in that first match. So I can't see anywhere where he doesn't come back in. And I think some of the players they left out the squad, Sanju Samson being the one that Ross would be shouting about right now, deserve to be in there, above at least 2 of them. And they're not. And I think that's gives you a pretty clear indication of what they're going to do. Bowling wise, I think they've got an interesting question, and then we'll move on from India and talk about another team. They could go. So we think probably they're going to play Arshdeep and Bhuvi and Yuzi Chahal, and then I'm not sure who that 4th bowler necessarily is. So they've got a choice, Max, between Avesh and Bishnoi, or Avesh and Chahar, or Chahar and Bishnoi. I'm not sure Chahar was named in the official squad, but he's on standby, and I think it'd be pretty easy to just ring him up get him in the 11. So I'm including him in the kind of equation for now. Where would you put your money?
I think probably Avesh, just because I think with Chahar and Bhuvi, you might be overloading a little bit up top in terms of power play bowling. Obviously, Arshdeep's got the end sorted, but perhaps Avesh Khan can do a 2-and-2 job, and you've got slightly more balance there. And Hardik Pandya we might even see him bowl 4 overs, because he's been bowling in ODIs now. I think we can pretty much put aside the is Hardik going to bowl thing. Finally, he looks sorted, and he looks back to being near his best. So that's a really nice fillip for them as well. So I would lean towards Avesh personally, even if he did have a bit of a tough time in a couple of those West Indies games, but I think he's probably the way they would go.
Okay. Any final thoughts on India or Pakistan, Nick?
I think it's just an exciting tournament for the Kohli aspect, isn't it? That with the World Cup around the corner, how he goes in these few games will have real knock-on effects moving forward, and no doubt there'll be much discussion whatever happens. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him back.
Great. Nick, we'll move on now to your area of expertise and talk about Sri Lanka, the 3rd of the big 3, if you like, in Asian cricket.
Thanks for backing me up on that, Jack.
Yeah.
They're still there.
The 3rd.
Clinging on.
Yeah. The thing that I immediately want to sort of ask about is why they have picked so many more players. What's going on with that? The last check, last count, it was 20 players named in the squad, with 3 more that have been ruled out. So there's been a few changes. I think India had named 15 officially. So they've kind of got 5 more players. Why is the whole question there?
I don't know quite what is going on there, Jack. I mean, I know they initially named players who were sort of on the border of, they weren't sure whether they were going to be fit or not. I think some of the bowlers, Rajitha and Shamira. So they named kind of standby replacements. There's a funny thing where the squads have to go and be ratified in Sri Lanka by the sports minister. So the sports minister has to sort of tick off every player and say, yep, you're all right. So I know they sent extra names to the sports minister for ratification. I don't know if that led to them sort of picking more players. They picked a lot of bowlers who haven't had very many caps, so maybe there's something in that they're not quite exactly sure who they're going to go with, and it's just a bit of a kind of let's turn up at practice and see who looks all right.
For the World Cup last year, they were in the sort of the pre-qualifying group for the main group stage, and at times looked a little bit iffy. They kind of grew into that tournament though, and a couple of new stars emerged. I mean, Hasaranga obviously has been on a real tear over the last 12 months. How do you rate the state of Sri Lankan T20 cricket at the moment, and who should we be looking out for in this tournament?
I think that Sri Lankan T20 cricket is in a really interesting place right now and is potentially on the verge of a bit of a breakout. Obviously, as you touched on, Hasaranga is the big star who's just kind of smashed it in the IPL and has really sort of grown into the public consciousness in the past year. Another guy who's done really well there is Bhuvneshwar. And so I think Bhuvneshwar and Charitha Lanka, for me, are going to be the two crucial batsmen who this kind of team is built around. In terms of other bowlers, I think this is a really potentially exciting, dynamic Sri Lankan attack. And I think that Chamira, who's the sort of, pace spearhead, and Binura, who is 6'6", 6'7", which is very unusual in Sri Lanka and was probably looked on to play in Australia. I think those two guys missing this tournament is no bad thing because it opens up opportunities for Mahesh Patirana, who was unleashed by CSK sort of straight out of the under-19s. He's been dubbed Junior Malinga, hasn't yet played a game for Sri Lanka, but he could be a really exciting death bowler. And then Asitha Fernando, another kind of strong-shouldered seamer who did really well in the recent Sri Lanka Invitational T20 tournament. He topped the wicket charts and was player of the tournament. And so I think those two guys should get game time. Neither of them have played a T20I for Sri Lanka before, but I think it's a chance for one of them to sort of lock themselves into the team ahead of the World Cup. I think the big issue Sri Lanka really face is the strike rate of their batsmen. If you look down the list of the top six, I think only Bhuvneshwar's striking over 130. And I mean, if you've got a collective strike rate of 120, it's going to be pretty hard to get big enough totals to win games. So I think that's something they really need to address.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say. I've got a question. It's slightly tangential on Hasaranga. Obviously, he wasn't given an NOC to go to the hundreds to play in that, where I think he'd made £100,000, which is that's an awful lot of money. What's the dynamic there between players and board? Because that feels like a big power play for the Sri Lanka Cricket Board to make.
It feels like a massive power play, doesn't it? Especially when I think the official reason given was rest, and then he's playing in an SLC Invitational tournament. It's strange. It's a little sad. £100,000 is a pretty life-changing amount of money for a young Sri Lankan cricketer, and I think the exposure. I mean, as a Sri Lankan fan, I was very excited about seeing Hasaranga in the 100. I don't have any sort of inside knowledge on this, but I can't imagine he was overly happy with that decision. And there has been a bit of a history in Sri Lanka of the board maybe not necessarily always being in total harmony with the players. And so it'll be interesting to see what we get in the coming months with all these leagues coming up, the Big Bash, the SA League, the IL20, what Sri Lankan availability is for those.
Yeah, and that was sort of kind of what I was driving at. I mean, he does have a big contract for RCB in the IPL, so £100,000 is a lot of money. But I think he made $1 million at the IPL. So I don't know, maybe there was some kind of a quid pro quo in terms of future NOCs issued or something like that. I was wondering if there's any insight there, but it did strike me as a little strange. Also in the group is Bangladesh, and Nick, you mentioned that Sri Lanka had a
low strike
pedestrian strike rate. I had a look at every Bangladesh batter who has played a T20 for them since the start of 2021, and not a single recognised batter strikes at over 120. Most of them in the the 1-10s if they're lucky. Max, that is pretty abysmal.
It's
isn't it, from a
diabolical.
Bangladesh point of view?
It's beyond abysmal. It's awful, and it's not going to win you T20 cricket. And I think I think Sri Lanka and Bangladesh are a really nice comparison, sort of where you say Sri Lanka might be on the verge of a breakout in terms of T20s. Bangladesh are going the other way, really, and they have been for a while. I think we've spoken about it before. A lot for me comes down to, I mean, the pitches they play on in home series, they're not conducive to anyone scoring at over 110 because they're very hard to bat on. And they win reasonably regularly at home in T20 bilaterals because mainly the pitches. Like we saw them play against New Zealand and it was a bit farcical sort of a year and a half ago. And, without sort of fixing that issue, you're not going to be able to get guys breaking out and being able to play in a way that might get you a contract in a franchise competition, be it the PSL, the IPL, over to the 100 or whatever. And yeah, it just means that they're not set up to win games of T20 cricket when they're not playing in Bangladesh. And I mean, there's a whole host of stuff going on with Bangladesh and like the board being in control and not having a head coach and all sorts of madness going on there. And Shakib Al Hassan is stuck basically with all of it. How long that's going to last is a whole other thing, and it's a bit of a shame really because they looked like they were really on a positive trend in sort of not too long ago. So they are sort of in Test cricket. They're not doing too badly. So just it's a bit of a shame on the T20 side that it is like this. But yeah, I think they're probably going to struggle against both Sri Lanka and Afghanistan. I mean, if there's one team Sri Lanka want to play with an average strike rate of 120, it's Bangladesh, isn't it?
It feels to me like Bangladesh. T20 cricket is really the format that they're lagging behind in compared to the other two. They had a pretty good 2019 World Cup. They got an away win in New Zealand, which is a pretty astonishing achievement to be honest in Test cricket. I wonder, and Nick, I'll ask you this. I wonder if there's a scenario where they could do quite well if we see pitches similar to some of those used for the second half of the IPL and the World Cup last year. They've got a few decent bowlers. They've got the Fizz, they've got Shakib Al Hassan, Mahdi Hassan rather. Are all the flip side of playing on terrible pitches is that you do develop bowlers that are quite good at bowling on terrible pitches. So if you see a few of them, in this tournament, there's the potential maybe that they can get on a bit of a roll.
Yeah, I don't think we can write them off at all. You said they've got the Fizz and they've got lots of decent spinners. And I think another important point to mention is the UAE and the dew factor. I mean, we saw at the World Cup in 2021, it was pretty much win the toss, chase, win the match. And so I think all the games here at the Asia Cup are going to be 6 p.m. starts. So we might see something similar here where the value of winning tosses could be really crucial. And I think Afghanistan and Sri Lanka would probably be the two that most people would pick to go through to the semis. But I don't think we can rule out Bangladesh. I think that could be a really tight group.
Is Shakib been practicing his coin flipping?
Let's talk about Afghanistan, the fifth team that we know will be featuring in the tournament. For once, based on recent tournaments anyway, for once they seem to have picked most of their best players. Now, who knows who will actually make it into the 11? But I was looking through, who's played well for them in the last couple of years with bat and with ball, and it looks like more or less the team I'd have picked. The one player you might have expected to see who isn't there is Kai Samid, but when you've got Majib and Rashid Khan sort of in front of him in the spin rankings, if you will, you can also see why they might not have gone with him. What I think is really interesting about this Afghanistan team, and potentially where they're showing growth, is that I think they're going to bring a couple of seamers to this tournament that are a big upgrade even on last year. So one of them we did see last year, and I think he's got better, Naveen ul Haq. had a very good T20 blast. I think I described him as a pound shot Bumrah at last year's tournament. I think he might be, you know, a WH Smith Bumrah.
Oh, yeah,
now.
is he upgraded now?
He's
B&M bargains.
I think he looks like he's on a good trajectory. And then the other guy who was actually picked up in the IPL auction, didn't play, was Fazalak Faruqi, left arm seamer, bought by Sunrisers Hyderabad. You know, make of it what you will.
Were you making a positive argument here?
Now, he hasn't really played that much cricket that has been tracked on sites that have good data resources. So not an awful lot on ESPN, not an awful lot on Crickmetric. But when he has played, it looks like his numbers are pretty good. Nick, what do you reckon of Afghanistan's chances here? Obviously, we know the spin's good. The batting is variable. They've got some guys who like to bang it around, and you know that can work. But the pace bowling, I mean, I think is really where they're showing growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree. I mean, I loved seeing what Naveen was doing in the blast. I was really impressed with him. And then when you've got the dual spinners of Rashid and Mujib, I mean, you can sort of bank on those guys not conceding a lot of runs. And as you say, they've got some guys who strike big. I mean, Nabi, Najbullah Zadran. I'm interested to see how they use Rashid Khan from a batting perspective, because I've been really impressed when I've seen him bat in the IPL. Coming in for little cameos. I wonder if there's a chance to use him up the order in the power play or something like that. But I think they are probably, although I shouldn't be saying this as a Sri Lankan fan, favourites to top the group.
I think that's probably fair. And in fact, why don't we do some predictions now? I mean, if you want to know about the qualifiers, Hong Kong look like they're in pole position, having won 2 of 2. Every other there's Singapore, I think, at bottom with no wins. Sorry, I should have actually. Let me get this up properly, and then I can tell you actually
do that.
who's doing
Afghanistan
this.
are exciting, aren't they? They're an exciting side.
Yeah.
I've got it now, Max. Hong Kong are top, 2 wins from 2. Singapore bottom, no wins from 2. UAE and Kuwait 1 win each. The matches to come: Singapore v Kuwait. That's happening now. Singapore batting. And Hong Kong v UAE, and I guess there could be a net run rate swing in that match. Probably Hong Kong wouldn't be favourites. So if they do lose,
is Singapore doing this without Tim David?
They would be out, but
I believe so, Max.
Yeah.
What? Because he wants the
Anyway,
100 money.
That's the state. Well, I think Tim David is slated to make a move to Cricket Australia, isn't he?
I think someone was already describing him as an
Australian
on the 100 commentary the other day. So
yeah, so I think that's going to happen. That's a long way of saying that Pakistan and India are going to go through in Group A. If we were going to call that match, who do you think will win, Max?
Pakistan and India.
Yeah.
I think India. I think the lack of Shaheen is just enough to tip it towards them. And I think, like you said earlier, Nick, I reckon there'll be a spectre, a ghost of Shaheen hanging over some of that top order. But India, I think they'll be fine in the end. They'll remember the pain of the World Cup, and they won't let it happen again.
Retribution. Nick, same thoughts?
Same thoughts. I think, unfortunately, I would love to go for Pakistan to pull another upset, but I think India just look too strong, especially given the absence of Shaheen. I think Pakistan are also maybe a little overly reliant on that partnership of Rizwan and Babar at the top. And India, on paper at least, look like they've got too much strength and depth.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. In Group B, who do we think will go through? And we'll start with you, Nick, this time.
I am going to go against what I just said. Sri Lanka to top the group and Afghanistan to qualify in second place.
Max?
I was going to go. I was assuming that Nick was going to say Afghanistan were going to top, and I was going to go contrary by saying that Afghanistan will either be brilliant and crumble into a heap, and that they would do that once and then come second. So I'm going to flip that back round and say Afghanistan are going to come top. They're either going to go ballistic or crumble in a heap, and they'll go ballistic enough to top the group, with Sri Lanka in second, and poor old Bangladesh bringing up the rear.
I think I support Max's point of view, but I think it will be close. I think that'll be where the better games happen, aside from the India.
Yeah,
Pakistan
I mean,
match.
there is a world in which Afghanistan plays Sri Lanka and Hasaranga takes 5 for 11, and it's a
two more questions. First of all, who do we think will win the tournament overall, Max?
I just say India, don't I? It's sad, it's boring, it's predictable, but they're comfortably the strongest side, and I think they will win it.
Nick?
Unfortunately, I can't really go against that. I don't see a world in which India aren't holding the trophy at the end of all this.
Go on, Jack. Go Afghanistan.
I don't think it'll be Afghanistan, but I do think Pakistan could win a one-off final against India.
They could. They definitely could.
I'm gonna say that just for point of difference. I think, as you both said, India are the strongest side, aren't they? But Pakistan, they can play sexy cricket, and that's important in finals. Final thing then. I want to, just for our listeners, is there a player that maybe they haven't heard of yet that you would point out as a player that could break through in this tournament and could light things up? And Nick, I'll go with you, and you feel free to name a Sri Lankan.
I'm going to go for a couple of Sri Lankans. So Charith Asalanka with the bat, who I thought was very unlucky not to be picked up in the IPL auction last year. And for those who aren't that familiar with the IPL, Mahesh Theekshana with the ball, who's a kind of Sunil Narine style mystery spinner. I think he'll do well on these UAE wickets, and I think he's going to be a real force in the next 5 years. Yeah,
I agree with that. I thought it was really good for CSK this year. Max?
Well, put me on the spot there. I think someone in that Afghanistan side, someone in that Afghanistan side could light things up. I mean, I think perhaps someone like Hazratullah or Gurbaz. I mean, I think we have mentioned them on the podcast before, but they're sort of the guys that can be really explosive for Afghanistan at the top of the order, and are just boom or bust, exciting cricketers. And I think one of those could go well, and we could see some fireworks.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Afghan as well, and I've said him already, Fazalak Faruqi. I don't know whether he will be good or not. The information looks okay, and he looks like a decent bowler. And certainly, scouts at least one IPL franchise think that he's a good player, which is it's a good point in his favour.
It's really a negative.
But I think for this tournament, maybe where the rubber hits the road on, from his point of view, and where we will actually get a clear idea of whether he can do it against Ireland. And not other teams, or whether, I don't know why I picked Ireland there, but you get what I mean, whether he can do it against some of the bigger nations. Anyway, we're going to wrap up the show. Max, what are the final messages for our listeners?
So like and subscribe on YouTube, head over to Twitter, Instagram and TikTok at The Cricket Pod. We posted a video on TikTok yesterday of some cricket where Matthew Wade hit the ball hard, and a lot of people watched it. So that's nice. People are doing things on TikTok. So head over there, patreon.com/The Cricket Pod to support us directly. And finally, this episode is brought to you by manscaped.com, the best in men's below the waist grooming, as you should know by now, as a regular listener of this show. And you can get 20% off at Manscaped and free shipping. Don't forget the free shipping with the code CricketPod.
Great. That's in the show notes. Nick, final word from you on where people can find your book.
Thank you so much for having me on, guys. Yep, An Island's 11 out now across the UK. Bang it into Google and you'll find several outlets selling it online. And very much appreciate a buy.
Great. Cheerio, everyone. Enjoy the Asia Cup, and we'll be back with coverage of that and other cricket shortly.
You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.